Welcome to the Happyness Helix Podcast. And I have a very distinguished guest today. He's known as TRA, and that's short for TR Anand. And he wears many, many hats. Sometimes wonder how he gets the time, the energy, and the inspiration to wear so many hats. And the other thing that I notice about TRA is that he is extremely involved and passionate about all the things that he does. He is very involved in whatever he does. And that, I think, is something that sets him apart from most of the people that I've had the pleasure of interacting with. So, TRA is, first and foremost, he is a governing member of TI Bangalore, the Indus Entrepreneurs. He is also a key person behind Swada Foundation, which I hope we will speak a little more about, and what it does to society, and why there should be many more people involved in such activities. He is also the chairperson of Matrix Forum, which is the deep tech initiative of TI Bangalore, where the ecosystem of about 2,000 plus startups in the IoT and deep tech area are being created, mentored, and helped. Aside of that, there are many, many other things that he's done. He's been an entrepreneur for most of his life, working with many, many companies like TCS, IBM, and many more. He's been a business coach, a mentor, and a seed investor. And he continues to inspire people with just his passion for excellence. He is very, very deeply committed to education and excellence in education, character building, that, if we can get youngsters the right kind of values and to focus on excellence, then their journey later on becomes that much easier, better, and they will achieve a lot more. My pleasure to have TRA on the show. Welcome, TRA. Exceptional, and thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you.
Chinu, you're really very generous in terms of, I'm not so accomplished. I'm a decent human being, I think, but many of those things are true. I do get involved quite a bit in what I do, because I think only with involvement comes the outcomes that you are expected to do. Second thing, I do believe that if I ask somebody else to do, I will not ask them to do if I am not prepared to do it myself, in that sense. So that's the other philosophy which has driven. The other thing which I think has been able to do is vision to execution. So I can do fairly 30,000 feet level vision setting, but also get down to execution in terms of if there's a document and if there's a full stop missing, I'll know that there is a full stop missing. Okay. And I do look for it, because that's what also sets the kind of standards that you want to So we'll talk a little bit about most of those things as we go along. A real pleasure to be here at the Happyness Helix. I have not known you for too long, but I think what we have seen of each other, I think we like what we do. We are passionate, and when you invited me to do a session with you, I said I would do so gladly, because it gives me an opportunity also to be able to express things. This is my first podcast in my life, in that sense. This is not the medium that I have done before. Though I work with technology a lot, but I mostly write. So I do comment and write quite a bit as I go. Even when I read, for example, on LinkedIn, I just don't like and say I like this, or I repost it. Whenever I repost, I usually repost it with my value addition. So the other key driver for me is what value have you added? And we'll talk about value creation and value addition as we go along. So Absolutely. Over to you, really pleasure. And as things go along, let's see how this conversation proceeds.
Absolutely. So, let's make sure that this is a good first experience for you for a podcast. And this is the first of many podcasts that you are invited to, and you can share your knowledge, your experience, your awareness for the betterment of society in general.
Sure.
Which brings me to why the Happiness Helix podcast is done. The intent primarily, TRA, is to make available to people the wealth of experience, knowledge and information that is available in a decocted, distilled form at no cost to as many people in society as possible. The premise is that we want to inspire, enable, empower and support people in living a happy life. So I've been on this journey of being a coach, happiness coach. I call myself a happiness coach for the last 14, 15 years. I started this journey a little earlier, and through the experience, I found out that it starts with this moment. So the Happiness Helix, I always start with the explanation of the Happiness Helix so that even if people have not seen earlier episodes, they don't have to go somewhere else. I don't want to put a link, say, go there and look at that. I'll give it to them here. So the Happiness Helix starts, it's a spiral going upwards. And anywhere and everywhere is the starting and the beginning and the end of the spiral. So this moment in life is the start of the spiral. And I call this moment as responsibility for one's situation in life. If I take responsibility for my situation in life, chances are from landing point 1, I'll get to point 2, which is I will have a good attitude. From point 2, with a good attitude, chances are that I'll get to landing 3 or point 3, which is I will be supported, liked, and I'll have a larger circle of people to draw upon. If all of this happens, then I will get to point 4, which is I will set and achieve my objectives by design consistently and predictably.
Yeah.
And if that happens, I will get to point 5 or landing 5, which is I will have greater self-confidence, belief. When I have that, I'll get to point 6 or landing 6, which is I'm not going to be on survival mode. I will take on larger, greater than me objectives, which are for society in general. Yeah. For example, for me, starting this podcast happened when I stopped looking at me alone.
Yeah.
And I stopped worrying about putting myself out there.
Yes.
Because today, being out there, it comes with a lot of people only see what they think is good, which is lots of people know you, etc., etc. But I'm also opening myself up to criticism, and people will do whatever they want. But regardless, so point 6 is I have greater, larger than myself objectives, which means that I'm going to wake up every morning wanting to live life and do something useful. And I will take responsibility for myself, and the spiral continues. So it's the same thing, but an earlier podcast, a guest, Jaya, he said, we don't come back to the same point because time has passed.
Yeah.
So we come back to a similar point with greater experience. So this is the Happiness Helix 6 landings. The opposite of that is what I call the unhappiness slide, which this moment again begins with this moment. I don't take responsibility. I'm blaming everything and everybody else, which means it gets me to point 2, which is I am not having a great attitude, which brings me to the third point, which is most people don't want me around them. Hopefully I haven't done that, because otherwise you wouldn't have come on the podcast.
So, I don't think so. Yeah, right.
Which is what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So greater, if I'm likable, chances are people will support me. In the unhappiness slide, I'm not liked. My circle or people that I can draw upon shrinks. My support structure comes down, which means that I do not achieve my objectives consistently, predictably, which leads to not feeling good about myself, lower self-confidence, etc., etc., which leads me to the 6th point, which is I'm now going to be so focused on survival, only for myself, selfish, Duniya gaya bhar mein kind of thing. Pardon my Hindi. I am a Tambram from Chennai, so pardon my Hindi. But, let the world go to hell kind of thing. I want to focus on myself, right? So this is something that came to me. I was explaining this to a classmate of mine. And I was sitting in his home, and he was opening up a bottle of wine. A good friend of mine, Venkatraman, a very senior professional. And he looked at me and he said, Chinu, this is a corkscrew, da. So I said, you know what, unfortunately in India, it can be misheard. I don't want to use that name. So I said, let's come up with a happiness helix, happiness spiral, happiness helix. So first question for you. How does this resonate with you? What are your thoughts on this? How does it fit in with, excuse me, your journey of life? I'm certain that, what has come to me would have been experientially observed by you or experienced by you in some form or shape. So I'll now zip up and listen to you. First thoughts on what do you think of the structure? What are your thoughts?
Great. I think good. When I heard it first, and this is not the first time, we explained it earlier, and that's how I agreed to. I think it's a good framework in order to be able to be here and now, which I think is the most important part. And then that makes a good starting point. So I guess that's a good area. You also said you have to be able to invest in this, and it doesn't cost you anything, rather. Actually, it does cost. It does cost in a sense, in a very positive way. People have to invest time and be able to listen and do active listening is what I would say. And I'm influenced by Stephen Covey. I'll come to that a little later. So if they do that, I think that there will be some messages for them. And over your many podcasts that you have, some of them, they can resonate better and some of them may not. So I think the starting point, which is understanding responsibility and accountability and ownership, is important. And that's the first starting point. Most people find it useful in terms of responsibility and accountability. But the way it actually transpires subsequently is you're responsible for what is the question. And in what context? If the context is you and your environment and the surroundings, and you're responsible for all of it, that's fine. But if the context is I'm responsible for outcomes which are positive for me, then I think it is a worrisome factor, because then you've already limited yourself. And even though you might be at the start of the spiral, you might actually only move downwards with it. In that sense, that's what I think will probably happen at that point of time as we do. The second one is the positive attitude, which is the can do and will do, which is you all right, you've taken responsibility, but then if you sit idle, you're not really going to make it happen, which means I have to do some things in order to be able to, because a lot of people start with goals. This is like your annual resolution, So you do the resolution, but if you don't really follow up with it, and we have done all this, nobody is perfect. We have made probably too many resolutions which we can't do. So the can do and will do attitude, which is your second, I'm putting it in a slightly different word, will probably help. And if you do that, and if you execute well, then in order to do that today, one of the good things that helped me, and I'll speak about it when I did my my corporate career, is that you need to work with large teams, and you want to be able to get the best out of team in terms of synergy. And that happens, with a lot of what I would call as your sphere of influence. And here, I use the sphere of influence from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, where you talk of dependence, independence, and interdependence. So, if you're looking at, you're already now into independence, and then you're going to be interdependent too. And that's the area where you are able to influence others, which is one of the landings that you have as you do that in that sense. Subsequent to that, if I remember right from what you said, is that you will have an achievement which is consistent, so you are achieving your goals, and you also have a positive feeling of surety that you will achieve your goals, which is essentially the confidence that comes from execution, confidence that comes from having the capability to do this, confidence to be able to leverage the strengths of others. Not just leverage, you need to understand the strengths of others, confidence to know that you cannot be good at everything in that sense, and therefore you have to be able to assemble teams, and even that is, I will talk about teams a little later, otherwise I'll probably finish everything here. So once you do that, that's your next stage in that sense. And that also comes from execution as you go along. The next stage, if I remember right in what you said, is that if you do this, then success will come to you, which is your achievement level in that, and you're sure of your success. And this boosts your self-confidence, right? It boosts your self-confidence. It boosts you to be able to achieve more and set higher goals that can be achieved and so on. And these translate over a period of time into your beliefs and actions. And we'll come to beliefs and actions as a point later on in that sense. But I think that is what will drive, if you're in the positive mode here, then that will drive your beliefs and actions. And I think that will guide you a long way, at least it has done for me, in terms of achieving a majority of what I would call fulfillment of successes. You would have successes, and sometimes there will be failure. There are going to be ups and downs, but I think that's been able to achieve. Once you do this, finally, you will be able to set higher goals. And these higher goals need not necessarily be your own goals. They need not necessarily be material goals. And these vary with time in your life and career. And when we speak about it, I will share what my experience has been. But this is probably my understanding and how your Happyness Helix framework resonates with how I understand it, interpret it.
Thank you, Tiare. I think I'm going to listen to this portion again because it's going to refine my way of explaining it to people as well.
Okay.
So thank you very much for that. See, one of the constant pieces of input that I got over the last 8 episodes that I have recorded and put out is that there is a lot of focus on entrepreneurship that you have. And what about people who are not entrepreneurs in that sense, but they're actually entrepreneurs within a larger framework? So intrapreneurs, as we call them today. That they are business owners, but they are not entrepreneurs in that sense of the word as it is understood, but entrepreneurs. So I think that is one thing that I've seen you speak about a lot. So that also inspired me to ask some questions where it will be possible for you to share your journey when you were in these large organizations and how it might resonate with those people who are already on the journey right now. Because somewhere I also realize that somewhere we make it that, entrepreneurship is like this superhero kind of role. Everybody is a general kind of thing. No, I don't think so at all. I think entrepreneurship is as important a role and an attribute to have as is being an employee who can support the entrepreneurship initiative. Every cell in the body has its own purpose, right? There is this famous joke that said, all the parts of the body decided, and then, what we came up with. Let me not go there. But then I think one of the other things that I would like to also speak about is your journey in terms of the intrapreneurship journey.
Okay.
Your coaching, mentoring of intrapreneurs that you do consistently. Also, the other feedback that we obtained was that, your podcasts are very, very long. So make them into smaller bits so that we can listen to them at our leisure. So started with episode 8 where we made it into 3 parts. So again with you, what we probably will make it into 3 parts. It's going to be a full day for you.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought that the first part could be about your journey of life.
Okay.
Your journey of life as starting from your education. Why did you choose what you're doing? Most people don't realize that the socio-economic, geographic, cultural, political, religious ethos that exists at a point in the time-space continuum defines how people act in that point.
Correct.
So today, when we look back at something that happened 40, 50 years ago, it might seem very, very not very relevant or correct.
Yeah.
A little like, when we watch movies that came out in the 50s and 60s and 70s, when people watch them, they're like, what kind of thing is this? But that was relevant in that time.
Yeah.
So I'd like for you to definitely speak about the relevance of the socio-economic structure that existed when you were growing up, how that affected you, why it made you choose the things that you chose, and how it came about. So part one, in terms of your journey as education, being a corporate executive, having traveled, just this morning you shared that 40 countries that you have actually traveled to and interacted with 40 different cultures, from Sydney to almost everywhere around the globe. So all of those things, what are the things that you have noticed? That's part one. Part two, I would like to, I'm thinking I'm making it up as we are going right now.
Okay.
Part two would be your deep interest in excellence in education and making education available to those less fortunate. And how do we inbuild the ethics, the principles, the values that are needed for the long term? That's part two. And what are your thoughts on that? Part three, I would like to speak about deep tech, Matrix Forum, the future of deep tech and all of the technology that we are seeing in India and across the globe. I don't want it to be India-centric. I haven't traveled as much as you have. And I'd like it to be relevant to people across the globe. And the fourth one is something that is very, very close to my heart, Tiare, which is ethics, principles, values in leadership. Leadership is a loose word I'm using here. Ethics, principles, values in personal living. How, my favorite statement that every client of mine hears from you is, how I do one thing is how I do everything. How I do the small things in life is how I do the large things in life. So 4 parts that I've come up with. I'm hoping that it'll fit with your approval. It'll meet your approval. So if that's okay, then I'd like to just shut up and ask you to share your journey. How did it begin?
Okay.
As much detail as you can share. And I'm requesting you, don't try to be politically correct at all. I want TRA, the human being, for everybody to see, hear, and learn from.
Okay. So I think that's a very large canvas. I'll try to incorporate all these as you have stated. And some of that might get mixed up, so that's okay in that sense. But I think it's very important to look at, I think one of the key statements you made is that in the initial years, what was the social, economic, political scenarios, and what impact did it have in the various circles of influence. So I'll try to cover that because I think that helped, at least for our generation. For the current generation, it may be a little different, so we'll probably I will hazard a guess in that. So I think the first part, so I will cover all the 4 parts, but probably each of these parts had played a major role in one segment of my life or the other. So I think that's the way I will take it.
Absolutely.
So, for example, the segment on deep tech, etc., is part 3, which is consulting and advisory that I have done. The segment on leadership and the values and the success, material success, business success, etc., and how you can be, as what you said, probably the difficulties that you go through, and as our friend said, the difficulty of being good, Gurcharan Das said that. So that's really true. And how do you still stay on course in that sense? So that's the second part I'll cover. But I'll fold it into my life, I think, to begin with. And some of this, maybe people have not heard, including my children sometimes. So you'll probably hear some of that as we go along. And so that's how I think it'll cover. So it'll be 4 parts. Part 1 is about your early learning knowledge acquisition, and the environment. That's the part one that I had, which I would call, and in terms of the different parts of, as per Hindu Shastras, it will be the Brahmacharya stage, if you want to take it that way, So that's probably the stage where you're really a student, and we will cover that as a part of the student activities, and what really, as a student, you're really building competency. But I'll talk a little bit about competency, but more than competency, which is visible in terms of your degrees, in terms of your marks, in terms of your prizes, etc. But character, competency and character is probably what early stage, first stage. Second stage is the entire area of entrepreneurship. And it is very relevant for me because I started to work 50 years ago in one of the first computer companies, as we call them. So it's actually finished 50 years, and I'll talk a little bit later. So at that point of time, you had to be an entrepreneur because there was no PC, there was no laptops, etc. But I spent a lot of time in that area. So the entrepreneurship and what it taught me in life and how I moved during the stage of entrepreneurship. And I probably, even my corporate career is probably entrepreneurship. So that's the second stage that I will cover. The third stage, I'm fortunate or unfortunate, and I'll cover both the unfortunate part and the fortunate part, is when I made a transition into advisory and consulting, which is the third part. And it is where a lot more was not driven by business goals. So that's the third part which I will cover. And the fourth part, which is now and here, I'm still in the third to fourth stage kind of stuff. But the fourth stage is really the end game, as I call it, in terms of living your day every day in that sense. So which is really the last stage of fulfillment, if you want to call it that way, and create a sense of abundance. So we'll cover some of that and in the last stage. And all of them, I think I have covered. The one on deep tech will be covered in part 3, etc. So maybe if that is a framework which is acceptable, and please feel free to interject with any questions that you want. I'll cover that as we go along in each of these stages.
Okay. One of the things that I ask my clients, and I do actually a program on this also.
Yeah.
This is not a plug.
Okay.
This is a statement of fact.
Yeah.
Is what should people be, how it's, the only thing that is certain in life, is dying.
Yeah.
Ramana Maharshi said it beautifully.
Yes.
The moment you are born, you are dying.
You're dying, correct.
That's the only certainty in life. So this morning, I had posted something on my fitness regimen, and some of my classmates opined that, I was driving myself a little too hard, etc., etc. So again, in a flash of whatever came to me, I said, the only certainty, the only inevitability in life is death. Destination is clear. We're all dying. So I'm focusing on the journey.
Yeah, correct.
Rather than the destination. Destination is very clear. I'll focus on the journey, which is how I'm living life. Yeah. Am I making my life a lovely painting that people can learn from? Or whatever it is. It's a lovely song. Whatever it is that, resonates with people. So I think this structure that you mentioned, and I'm certain, TRA, if you say I worked for 50 years, there are going to be people who are listening who said 50. Recently, day before yesterday, we had a youngster who grew up right next to our home.
Yeah.
He had come home. He's just turned 20. And I've seen him from when he was 1 year old. So when I told him that, my wife and I, we've been married 31 years, he looked at me and said, Uncle, that's half more than my full life that you've been married. So some people are going to be listening to you and say 50 years working, and they're going to say, wow. And I also want them to learn that how you've made these transitions and how you've stayed relevant right through. Because I see you being extremely relevant even today. Yeah, because like you rightly said, you've adopted the right approach, right thing to do at the stage in life that you are in. And you have, I've also seen you do this, that you have benefited from the fortunate and the unfortunate, both you have learned from, and you are distilling it and putting it in capsule form and giving it away to people.
Yeah.
And the listeners and viewers who are going to be listening to you will benefit from listening to all of that. And like you said, some of it might resonate, some of it they might say, this is nonsense. Perfectly all right.
Okay.
And mindful listening is also something that you picked. And you said they are going to invest. And if they listen mindfully, there is learning always in it. So with that,
Yeah.
where did it start for you? What was the kind of family structure? What were your initial influences? What were your drivers?
Yeah. I think, so we'll start that way. I think the initial formative years will be very important. And like most of us in the city of Bangalore, I'm a Bangalorean and I'm a third generation Bangalorean.
Wow.
Okay, so in a sense then we are a Kannadiga, but we were actually not Kannadigas. We are Tamilians in that sense, right? As what they call Iyengars, which is a community primarily focused. And more than Iyengars, my father's grandfather was a priest. Okay.
Wow.
And he was also a scholar. So we come from the, and in the name TRA, T stands for Tirumalai. So Tirumalai is the Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam's name. And we do have, and my father took a lot of time to generate what you call genealogy and ancestors. And we have the data going backwards up to 1452.
Wow.
Okay, so I still have that. It's about whatever number of generations that you want. And now my brother is maintaining it. Okay, now it's computerized. But it's actually was on paper. So that's our history in that
1452.
Yes, I still remember that.
So about 570 years.
Yeah, 570 years of my ancestors, in that sense. And that's a huge tree, obviously. It goes in. For example, if I say today, there must be at least 25 to 30 Tirumalays in 20 square kilometers in San Jose, Santa Clara, including my brother, my sister's son, and so on and so forth. That's one. Bangalore itself will have more than 100, I would guess, in that sense. So my great grandfather was a priest, and he was a good scholar. And of course, they came down from Tirumalai area to Kolar. Okay, so Kolar is at the confluence of the Kannada, Tamil, and Telugu speaking, all three languages. So my father knew and was able to speak all three. Of course, I can speak Tamil, but I can only read and write Kannada. So I would think that our mother tongue is Kannada right now for the last many years. And while I'm speaking, the influence of learning and the Hindu religion, obviously, like all the ancestors, they were fairly religious in that sense. And more so because I think my great-grandfather was a teacher and also he was a Sanskrit scholar. Okay, I'll show you one book. This is called Sri Ramakshara Malika Stuti. Wow. So what this says is it is in praise of Rama for every letter in the Devanagari script. Right, going up to the end. So, and you can see the nice stuti, which is in text, which my father found, and then he published it in a small booklet in that sense. So this is and there is meanings and languages. So this is one of the things that he did, which influenced. Anyway, I'm just mentioning this as a part of the exercise of knowing. Of course, my grandfather came to Bangalore and he was working in the state Huzur Treasury in the erstwhile Mysore government, because Mysore was one of those states of India, right, before it got integrated. And this is on my father's side. My mother's side, and my father, okay, let me finish that part of the discussion. And therefore, actually, I will have to go back to, if you take my grandmother and my grandmother's side, they were also fairly religious, but the other great influence of mine for me was my grandmother's brother, who was again we were either Swamis or Acharyas in our state. My grandfather was a Lakshmanachar, my father is the Rangaswami. And if you go back, the Achar and the Swamis alternate in terms of the names, that's there. But he was kind of a rebel, his name is G.N. Acharya. He was a journalist, okay, during the early years. He was a journalist pre-independence, and during Independence Day. And he wrote a lot of this. In the olden days, I don't know, there was a magazine by R.K. Karanjia called Blitz. I don't know whether many people know today. And he used to write a weekly in that called National Affairs. Okay, he was also very much involved in the freedom movement. And here is a book which is a collection of his writings. And not so much in the book, this is the best of Acharya, all his articles that were there. Wow. But what is here is a picture with Mahatma Gandhi here in this. So this is basically after the discussion in 1942. It says, I'll tell you here, surrounded by Indian journalists. This is Gandhi with Acharya, K.A. Abbas, U.G. Rao. These were all the people at that time. And they were coming down from Birla House where the discussions were on. Now, why I mention all this is, these are some of the influences in my life. His daughter was another big influencer, and she was one of the first nephrologists in the country. She's called the mother of nephrology. Vidya Acharya is her name, and she spent all her life in KEM hospital, and she passed away a few years ago. But she was again very devoted to service. So why I mentioned these are all kind of influences on my life at that point of time. So now I come back to my father. So this is on my mother's side. My father did his intermediate here in the Government Arts and Science College, and in the first year of intermediate, he was part of the freedom movement and was arrested, and he was in jail for about 15 months or so. Okay, and then he got released. But he never wanted to be recognized as a freedom fighter, in that sense. And then he continued and finished his BSc and joined HAL here in Bangalore. At that time, there was a joke was, if you had arms and legs and you could walk to HAL, you would get a job in Bangalore. So these were the public sector states. So he spent his entire career in HAL and retired as a chief chemist in HAL. But more important than that, he was very devoted to this. Again, and this is where I think the character part comes in. My father was for a long time associated with Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs. I don't know, this is an institution started by D.V. Gundappa. I don't know whether DVG as he is known for Mankutimana Kagga. So DVG he was a journalist, he was a writer, he was a political, not so much activist, and a very prolific writer. Unfortunately, he didn't get the Gnanpith Prize, and most of the Gnanpith winners have said he should have got one. Later on, I'll quote something from Mankutimana Kagga, okay, in that sense. But more importantly, my father was the treasurer of GIPA for many, many years, and he was part of the inner circle of Gokhale Institute. And they had a study circle. So right from the age of 6 or 7, I know, we used to have cycles at that time, and he never owned a vehicle in life. But we were in Jayanagar, in Jayanagar, 3rd block, and very early is where I was born. We used to go from 3rd block. I used to sit in the bicycle in front.
60s?
Huh?
60s?
1952, 53 is when he built the house. Wow. So I was born in 1956, I think. So we have been in Jayanagar from 1956 to 1971.
When it was truly a paradise.
Yeah, it was a paradise. I mean, we were in Jayanagar 3rd block where the Cosmopolitan Club is today. People who know Jayanagar. And the swimming pool, none of them existed. There was a ground in which we used to have cricket matches and all that kind of stuff. And this old Bangalore, the Jayanagar 4th block where the complex is where the Ramaseva Mandali and the kacheris used to happen. And Jayanagar, there was no 5th block. 5th block and onwards was all mango groves. You can actually go and pluck mangoes, okay, in Jayanagar. Forget about JP Nagar and all that. And South End was really South End. The last bus stop from Majestic was at South End, right? And from South End, we had to walk about a kilometer and a half. And then 4th block became a bus stand, Jayanagar 4th block, for a long time, And then you, of course, had the Route 1 from 4th block to Yeshwantpur, which made Rajnikant famous. So you know Rajnikant, he was the conductor in that route. Okay, so this is all my childhood here. But I'll come back to character. Okay, so we used to go to... So every Sunday, right from about 6 or 7 years, I used to go to the Gokhale Institute, listen to all these people and lectures. And then DVG used to do a study circle and pick up a famous book. For example, we used to do Kalidasa's works. And he used to do, I still remember Abhignana Shakuntalam. And then he will pick up a verse and the verse is just incidental. He'll explain and then he will relate it to the very prolific, very well versed. So those instilled a lot of the early knowledge in terms of one being with, stalwarts who were literature-wise well read and studied. And I still remember a number of things. There was another gentleman called A.R. Krishna Shastri and then G.P. Rajaratnam. So all these people I've heard very well. And Krishna Shastri, for example, he wrote a book called Nirmala Bharati, Makkala Mahabharata. Makkala Mahabharata is Mahabharata for children, and I still have the manuscript with DVG's writing.
Wow.
Here, okay, which essentially he said, and for people who know Kannada, I'll be able to write, say, Nanna mitraru Sriman T.L. Rangaswamiyavara maga Shri Anandamurtige Ashirvada Purvaka Dr. V.R. Krishna Shastrigalavara Krupe, DVG.
So I know at least one person amongst my friends who's going to want to meet you.
Yeah.
Because when you say that, DVG has given this to you.
Yeah, DVG has given that.
I'm certain he will want to meet you.
Yeah. I also have his Mankutti autographed by.
Wow.
DVG. This is also given by D.V. Gundappa, 20th December 1958.
I know he's going to be watching this.
So these are some of my treasured books. But more important, so we went to, I used to go to, and there a sense of, you have the meetings. DVG was a very humorous person. His humor was very good. And he also used to dive. Then we used to have the Vyasa Puja and community lunch. You sit on the floor with vada ele, and then people will serve. We will take turns to serve everything and all those kind of things. So very early on, I had a lot of what I would call as inputs into what should your life be like in that sense, apart from studies and so on. So I think I was very fortunate to get a lot of character inputs from things like this. And then, of course, 1967, my father got transferred to Nasik because the Nasik factory of HAL at Ozar was just starting. So they wanted some people from here to go. And it also gave him a promotion. So from what you would call today as worker grade, he became an officer. So we went, and I spent my next 4 years at a convent school called St. Xavier's in Nasik Road. And that was a different exposure in a sense. It was a school where I was not the best student in class, in the sense the syllabus, etc., was of a fairly high standard in Maharashtra. And I still remember, in today's world of 95%, 98%, 99%, I got 72% in my SSC, which was considered very good, first class distinction. 70% was distinction. But more than that, the thing that impressed me most was the library in the school, And the library was really fantastic. That's where I picked up a lot of. You used to get one book a week, in that sense. But I very early on opted to be the librarian and duty. So I would take a book every day to be able to read. The bus ride from the school to home was more than an hour. We stayed in a place called Devlali, which is a cantonment area, because that was the better residential area than Nasik city, which at that time was very dirty. Maybe it's cleaned up a lot, but we didn't want to live in Nasik. So during the bus ride, I would finish up the books also. So I was fairly a voracious reader at that point of time and read books and things like that. So that helped me to read a lot more of not just Indian authors, but a lot of the other Western authors and so on, which was a different exposure. And I think it helped me to understand what the world is like and what else. Because books were the only way you could do. There was nothing else. There was no internet, right? In that sense. So where will you get? Either you read newspapers, and you had radio, which was there. There was no TV, right? So in the radio would give you the latest news in that sense. And you would get publications, and you would get magazines, and you had the usual series of Chandamamas, and I think the Amar Chitra Kathas, etc. came later in that sense. But the Amar Chitra Kathas for us in middle class was still prohibitively expensive. So I don't think I remember. But I don't remember buying too many books, but we did buy a few, which I think was very good. But we spent a lot of time understanding. So I think I have to move forward in terms of what... So a lot of the character building in terms of what you want. And we were very happy at that time. So that's the other point that I want to talk. Talking about the happiness. You know, we had limited wants and needs, no vehicle, use the public transport, simplicity, but still very happy in that sense. So I think...
You took the metro to come here today.
Today I took the metro because I know there are 2 cars at home, in that sense. But I didn't want to go through the tension of Bangalore city's traffic in that sense. So I thought it's simple. And second thing is also a little bit of concern for the environment. You know, when the metro is available, and for me today, a big driver, and when I speak about Atria University and others, is sustainability. So we have a sustainability SIG within TIE and within what we do. So I think if we can contribute to sustainability. Anyway, going back in time. So those were some of the things. And so in
those days... interrupt you for a minute.
Tell me.
Because I found something similar in what you said.
Yeah.
I was not a very good academic student.
Yes.
That's the story of my life.
Yeah.
For you, I knew for one portion of life. For me, it was through life.
But I think that was the part. But when I actually came up to engineering, and I'll talk to you about that, I actually did well. I came first in 2 out of the 10 semesters.
Wow.
You know, in that sense. And so first rank in the university.
So I'll just share one anecdote.
So, but that was maybe incidental, and maybe I had developed a little bit of influence for electronics. And I think that was the other choice that we made at that point of time. So we'll do that. I think the key thing is, so spheres of influence, you know, initially parents, and what parents will communicate to you. And I haven't talked about my mother.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I covered a lot about, my father and his parents and his aunt and uncle and so on. But I think mothers are also equally influential. And mothers have been homemakers. And even more so in the earlier years when we were small. My mother was not a graduate. She had passed 10th. And then those days they get married early too. So she had got... Actually, not so early. And I think she got married when she was 23 or 24 years old, which is late in those days, maybe a little earlier. And the difference in age between my mother and father was more than 9 years, I think, in that sense, which is also fairly common. But she really managed the house, never felt that we were a very, what you would call in those days, maybe a lower middle class family, probably, middle class. And she never felt that, we never felt anything lacking. She gave us a lot of attention, helped us with a lot of our school work. She had learned Hindi and English on her own, and also gave us a lot of inputs into basic, managing relationships, valuing advice, respect for individual. These are all things which I think sadly are lacking today in today's context, and I see a lot of them. And also I interact with students, but my wife, who is a pediatrician, interacts with children, starting from deliveries and children who are born to up to 12 years. And she tells me that a lot of the children who come and whom she sees, the parents they adore their children, but they don't give them good advice or give them good character. And we see that everywhere. So I think that's one thing that is lacking in today's modern world, where the trait that most people gather or they think that it's right is, how do I get ahead of others is probably the most important. And what means I use to get ahead of others is not really important, in that sense. Second is, it's all about me and very little about public good. We see that we as Indians definitely lack the public awareness and also the fact, I keep saying to people, 3 Indians cannot stand in a straight line. Okay, so it's only 2, right? The third guy will be offset, and the fourth and the fifth will be really offset. You see that everywhere, and it's got nothing to do with education. Even if 3 millionaires are standing, they will not stand in a straight line. Okay, so in that sense. So they're all dollar millionaires in that sense, right? Or rupee millionaires. So that's a little bit lacking in today's world. Hopefully we'll be able to do correct. When I speak about Swada, we'll talk about that. So probably this is a wrap on this stage. And I think I was very fortunate to be able to get good, solid foundations in what matters in your life most in that sense. A good education, which I think we got very well. A good upbringing, which is, I think, what is right and wrong. And an ability to distinguish between right and wrong. And the ability to stay on the right side as far as possible. I'm saying as far as possible, because there are some situations where you probably cannot make the decision. So that is something that I think will take. I think as you become stronger in your beliefs, it becomes easier. But when your beliefs are a little wavery, then I think it's you discover more rights as you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. So I think we will probably wrap the education part, which is building character, and get on to the next section.
Absolutely. So, when you were speaking, Thierry, I think, it resonated a lot with my journey in life as well, where parents obviously are the first teachers, the first role models, and grandparents, the experience, the knowledge that they had, and just being able to have access. 2 anecdotes come to mind. The first one is when you were talking about not being a great academic student. For most part of my life, I wasn't a great academic student. And my daughter, when she was in 9th standard or something, she once said she was feeling very, very upset. So, and she was really upset. So my wife and I, we started speaking with her and asking her what was the reason. And she is saying, I'm not sure I'll do well in life. So we asked why. She said, I'm not doing well in my studies. So I asked her a few questions, because by that time I had already started this journey of being a coach, so to say. So I asked her a few questions. And so what will happen if you don't get good marks? What will happen? What will happen? What will happen? Went on and on. Finally, she said, I won't get a good job. I will not be a success. I'll be completely, useless. And at that time, I was the chief operating officer for a large business. And so I reached out, I asked her, I said, Shruti, do you think I'm okay? She said, oh, you have done very well. I said, okay. And no, why do you say that? You have you have a position in a large organization, you've done well. And I asked her, I said, do you think my English is all right? Oh, very good. All of this was good. So I said, hold on. So I said, I requested my wife, I said, Hema, can you get out my 10th standard mark sheet? She got out the 10th standard mark sheet and gave it to our daughter, Shruti. She looked at it and she said, Appa, you got such low marks. Yeah. You've got only 2nd class. I said, yeah, 2nd class. That's all I got. And she said, English, you got such low marks in English. I said, yes. So I said, don't go on the basis of what it is that you're looking at here. It is a question of how you're able to use this in life. This is another thing that I tell my clients. There is information that's available. Information, when it becomes understood, becomes knowledge. Knowledge, when it is used, becomes intelligence.
Correct.
Intelligence, when it is applied appropriately, becomes wisdom.
Yes.
Right? It's like, they say, the rose by any name will smell as sweet. And somebody said, but then you don't put it into cabbage soup. Like, cabbage soup needs cabbage, not rose in it. Maybe somebody will do a rose infused cabbage soup, but that's okay. The second anecdote that came to my mind when you were saying this is, there are no failures.
Yeah.
except when I don't even make the attempt. I'm going back to my journey when I was going to write the CA exam, the intermediate exam. And I didn't get leave to study. So I went up to my dad and said, Appa, I'm not writing the exam. So he said, why? And I was articled in his firm as an article clerk under him. But in the office, I didn't get leave and I had 2 weeks to go for the exam. So he said, why are you not writing the exam? He said, Appa, I will fail. He said something very interesting to me at that time, TRA. He said, if you don't write the exam, you will definitely fail. If you write the exam, you might fail. So write the exam. If you fail, we'll take that. But if you don't write the exam, you definitely fail. So I think the only thing that I've failed at is what I've not even tried or attempted to do. And I think, when you were speaking about your, the lineage 1452 onwards and the kind of role that your parents and elders and the circle of friends, I think it resonates a lot with me. And I think it is important, and I'm going to sound like an old fogey when I say this, but those parents, young parents out there would do well to make sure that they have the right kind of friends and that they also introduce their children to those friends, because we learn a lot, not just from our parents, but from their friends as well. So with that, absolutely lovely what you said.
Maybe a couple of anecdotes, in that sense, which I missed earlier, but you can probably
Please
say that. I think when you said in school, so studies, unfortunately, the whole culture of studies and prep text started with tests earlier, and now you have all these Akash and Baijus and Narayanas and, variety. They started so many. And now children are being put to this right from very early age. And that's the sad part of it, because life is not about acing and mastering a couple of tests, And today, if you see the advertisements, they are all putting in you fear of failure. So that's what I feel. You put all these, you see the front page ad and say that if your kid is not here, that means he's a failure in society. This is what is the message. There can only be 10 fellows who are first or whatever it is. But that's not being first in mastering an exam and writing and preparing for it from standard 8th or standard 6th or whatever it is. And, in our colony today, people say, is there a tuition teacher available for second standard? I said, second standard, why do you need tuition? Yeah? The child has to leave the books at school and enjoy life. There's no playtime. I mean, they do, but most of the time they're in front of either now with the mobile, because the mobile is everything. So I think it's important, and I did a lot of other things too. I mean, though I'm small in stature, I used to play football, and I broke my hand too. That's the only time I have broken a bone, I guess, in that sense. And I used to do debates and programs, and therefore it was okay. I was also house captain for more all-round activities, which I think is very important. So all-round activities and their hobbies, whatever they do, are very important. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, as a hobbyist, I'm very much interested in philately, and I have an unbroken collection of Indian stamps from 1968.
Wow.
Or so, And I used to cycle from, not in 1968, after 1973, GPO, the old GPO, not the new GPO building. So those times I used to cycle from Jayanagar and come to the GPO on the day of the issue for the first day cover and the folder and 2 stamps. Okay. So in fact, just a few days ago, I was going through my stamps and I have a full cupboard full of them. Now I thought I'll start to build some stories because they're all chronologically arranged. But maybe my next project will be to tell a few stories through stamps. Absolutely. So I'd probably do that because I anyway have that collection. I also have a global collection. This I inherited. How did I get this? The same grandfather whom I spoke about earlier, he passed on to me his collection, which includes a lot of World War II stamps, which were issued during World War II occupation and so on. So that's a very prized collection that I have in that sense. So philately was one of my hobbies. So if you ask me what did I spend my money on, or pocket money if you will, the only time I took money other than fees from my parents was for my stamps. I say, okay.
I'd be very surprised if your philately collection was anything but chronologically arranged, because you're very precise. And I'll say this, the number of chats we've had in preparation for the podcast tells me what kind of a person I'm dealing with. And the fact that you have notes and you're very particular about making sure that the right messages go out.
Yeah.
It talks to my thing of how I do one thing is how I do everything.
Yes.
So
I think so. And if you're known for that and you practice it, and then I think it becomes a part of the habit. Otherwise, if I didn't do, I would feel very uncomfortable. So that's the other part, and it will be unnatural also in that sense.
Preparation is always useful.
Preparation, and that's why my children even now tell me you're lost, and you're lost in your work and what you do today. I said, look, I will feel uncomfortable if I do not have a number of things to do in a particular day. It means that I am not keeping myself mentally active. Of course, I prioritize a lot now. I've told them, and we'll come to that in a little while later. So prioritization is important in life, which I learned a little later, I would say. Even if one of the failures that I did was I didn't prioritize early enough. But I think it is sufficiently early enough if you hear my story subsequently, which happened because of an incident, not otherwise. So I think we'll wrap here.
Absolutely. And with that, we are wrapping part 1 of this absolutely amazing exchange that we're having with TR Anand. And where we've learned a little about the influences, the reasons he is who, what, and how he is, and how the support system, his parents, have played such a phenomenal role in creating this kind of an environment and given him the right kind of inspiration to be who he is. In part 2, that's what you're going to be looking forward to. We're going to be talking about his journey, his corporate journey, his entrepreneurship journey, and the travel to 40 countries, the different cultures, how he came about, what he's done, what he's achieved, and therefore stay tuned. Look forward to that.